And we're starting with the Queen of Country. I'm talking about Dolly Parton. She's removing herself from consideration from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The legendary singer says, while she's grateful for the nomination, she doesn't feel she's earned the right and will be working 9 to 5 to release a rock album in the future. So what's your reaction to this? Dolly saying no thanks.
I mean, can I just say, first of all, that I have watched no less than 3 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies over the pandemic. I've never watched them before. I don't know what it was about the pandemic. They just felt like they were on. So I saw like Depeche Mode being inducted by Charlize Theron. I saw this group that I only vaguely heard about called T-Rex. They were inducted by Ringo Starr. And like suddenly I'm obsessed with their music. And most recently I was watching the one with Jay-Z, who was inducted by Beyonce and Blue Ivy. And pretty much everyone who is anyone was saying lyrics from Jay-Z songs. It was so, they're moving, they're interesting, and they're obviously eclectic. Like, people are celebrated for a variety of kinds of music, which is why I can't help but feel like Dolly is maybe giving a kind of silent protest or statement by rejecting the nomination, by saying she doesn't see herself as rock and roll, and therefore she does think that those categories matter. I'm curious, do you guys think that that's what's maybe happening, or she sees herself as a country artist?
Well, should we go to Nancy on Facebook?
She's like a
very
Puritan.
quickly?
Yeah.
Nancy wrote, I like Dolly, and I'm disappointed in her decision because I think she's earned her spot in the Hall of Fame. Rock and roll originates from country and blues, and many of the architects of these genres have been inducted. So are people saying that Muddy Waters, Hank Williams, Fats Domino shouldn't have been included? That's a great point, Nancy. I would say also like Miles Davis and Nina Simone are also there, and Johnny Cash, who is country, who is like Dolly. And it makes me wonder,
Michael
should they just
Jackson,
change the
James Brown.
Exactly. Do you change the name of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just to the Music Hall of Fame? Would that just solve everything?
Well, that's a great question, because I was thinking what you were thinking, Cynthia. I thought, is she just being a Puritan about music? Does she really purely see herself as just a country artist and not rock and roll the way that she thinks rock and roll is defined? And then I was looking up, like, who gets to define what rock and roll is? And in 2013, the then CEO, his name is Greg Harris, and he, to this very question, he said, specifically, he said, rock and roll was never just 4 skinny guys with guitars. He says it was always gospel, blues, R&B, jazz, country. It all feeds into rock and roll. So maybe that is it. Like, maybe the branding is off and she just doesn't see herself as a rock and roll artist because she is pure to her genre, which begs the question, are there really such a thing as genres in 2022?
Or maybe it has to do with, like, not genres at all. I mean, she couched it in those terms, but she also made a mention about not wanting to take votes away from other people. And the thing with Dolly Parton is, you see her name on whatever nomination list, you're gonna vote for Dolly Parton, especially if it has to do with music. But in the past, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has had some controversies with certain members not being inducted, not enough votes being attributed to certain people who were nominated, and people get upset. They're like, how could this person not get in? And I think what she doesn't want to do is take votes away from somebody and be involved in some kind of conversation. She's smarter than everybody else, remember.
This is
and
true.
it's not like this woman needs, it's not like she needs the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And she comes out of this looking so good. Everybody's like, Dolly's so humble, Dolly's so smart, Dolly's so amazing, Dolly's so gracious. It's a win-win for her.
You know what, Lainey? I love that point, because if you look at her career based on almost anybody else, at least in this year's class, who's getting inducted, you know, she's a unicorn in every way, but she has had a decades long career that maybe other artists, like, no shade to someone like Eminem, for example, he's been around for a long time, but Dolly's been around for a long time. And so maybe, you know, she's had so many accolades, so much recognition, that she's like, you know what, I'm okay. Like, if I'm gonna really stick to my guns on this one, I'm okay without this one. Let these people have a chance. Like, she's very, very humble. And will you get other recognition if you are an Eminem? This might be the biggest thing for him, I don't know. And maybe for Dolly, she's like, I'm in the Country Music Hall of Fame. I'm good. You go ahead, Em.
Another
You go
name
ahead.
came up, Dionne Warwick, because she was nominated last year and didn't get in, and then she's nominated again this year. So, Lainey, I really like your way of thinking that she's being very strategic about this, and she's turned down awards before. Do you remember she's turned down, I think, 2 presidential medals of freedom, but they were both from the last guy, so maybe that makes sense.
I just know I want to wait for this album that she's going to make, this
Yes,
rock and roll album. Like, come on.
Oh my gosh, just the outfits
Maybe her
alone.
husband will start listening to her music.